Welcome to Be an Encourager podcast, where real stories of transformation, faith, and redemption come to life. I'm your host, Claribel Coreano, and today I am truly honored to welcome an incredible guest. Joining us is Doug Belkofer, a U.S. Army veteran, tech leader, and the founder of Forging Truth, a mission-driven platform dedicated to helping people uncover the hidden beliefs that shape how they see themselves, others, and even God. From the outside, Doug's life appears successful, but internally he carried unexamined wounds and a quiet sense of unworthiness that left him disconnected from himself and the people he loved. When his marriage reached a breaking point, Doug was forced into a season of deep reckoning, one that transformed how he understood truth, personal responsibility, and the power of presence. Today, Doug courageously shares his journey to remind us that healing, clarity, and hope are possible when we are willing to face what's real instead of hiding behind who we think we're supposed to be. Please join me in warmly welcome Doug Belkofer, the founder of Forging Truth, to Be an Encourager podcast. For today is Forging Truth, Healing the Hidden Beliefs that Shape Our Lives in Faith. Now, my first question to you is, Doug, can you share about your beliefs that form in childhood, early adulthood, what trauma effects have in childhood, if you can explain that, and how these early beliefs shape the future of people and affect them as adults? If you can explain and elaborate and share your story.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm very glad to be here. So the thing about beliefs formed in childhood is that your ability to logically think about things, to analyze things, it doesn't exist yet. Your brain hasn't developed that far yet. Mm-hmm. And the parts of your brain that are functioning is emotions. And so when something happens that feels wrong or upsets you, a child will look at that and think to themselves, what did I do that caused this? They turn it in on themselves because that gives them a sense of having some control over it, because if they caused it, maybe they can prevent it next time. Mm. It gives them comfort in that moment. But it becomes, it turns into a belief because of how they turned it into themselves. And so then they start telling themselves, I need to be careful, to control things based on what I've learned and based upon these beliefs that came from these emotions. And another factor that comes into play is because you're so young and you then spend years, growing up with these beliefs, they slowly fade into the background and they start to seem just like, this is how life is. And you stop realizing that they're affecting how you perceive things around you. And in my case, if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, or actually more than that, 3 or 4 years ago, if I'd had any trauma in my childhood, I would have said, no, of course not. I didn't have any trauma. My childhood, I wouldn't say it was perfect, but certainly didn't have any trauma. Well, what I did have were several experiences that fed the same beliefs. Things like people leave, I don't matter, things like that. And so that led to me later in life having that kind of in the background of how I perceived everything around me. So, for example, every relationship that I've been in my entire life, up until the current one, of course, because now I understand all of this, deep down inside and under my awareness, I just assumed it was going to end. It was just a matter of time. And so as the relationship progressed, I became more distant. And what I was really doing without being aware of it is I was protecting myself. I was reducing my emotional investment so that when it does end, it's not going to hurt as much. And, so that's one example of how those early beliefs shaped how I behaved as an adult. There's the thing that I think is the part that really surprised me the most was realizing how hidden the beliefs are. And I don't know with certainty that it's going to be the same for everyone, but I know in my case, when it was first explained to me how this all works, I'm a very, very logical person. And so I had doubts about what I was being told. And so I thought, well, I'm going to research this myself. And I learned about how, and I've never stopped researching since, by the way, and this was for the last 2-3 years. So I've learned a ton about belief-based filters and how the brain works and the neuroscience behind it all, and how you can address it. So before I go too much farther, I think I want to give you a chance to jump in here.
Yes, because as you were sharing, what I heard you say is that as children, we tend to internalize those beliefs and those behaviors, those things that affect us, and we develop some self-defense mechanisms to protect ourselves.
Yes.
And we also get, like you mentioned, those fragmented memories. They come up in feelings, and certain things can be triggered by them. And we believe those things that we have created so much that we act them out as adults. Or I would say that for some individuals, it takes them a long time, like you mentioned, that you didn't know that that's what it was, but it surfaced. It came to the surface. I don't know if it came to the surface at a later time in your life, but it so happens that, like with trauma, it comes up. It may show up when the person is older because they didn't get to deal with the situation or what caused those false beliefs. Is that something that is correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I went through kind of a series of realizations. As I said earlier, when I first was, when this was all explained to me and I did my initial research, it made sense, but I hadn't made all the connections yet. And it was a few weeks later where it started to sink in more. And then I came to the realization related to the relationships and how that had affected every relationship I'd ever been in. And there were later stages of realizations. That's how it went for me. I know that for some people, they may be driven to dig into this because they see the same patterns repeating, whether it be in relationships or in their career or, kind of maybe just even with friends in their personal life. They start to see the same patterns and they start to wonder, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. And, I can't stress enough how much this is driven by things you're not aware of. So, is it related to things about you? Absolutely. But it's not about you doing something wrong or being at fault. That is definitely not the case.
That's good to know because many individuals kind of blame themselves for whatever they went through, not knowing that they have to process whatever happened and know and acknowledge what that happened and work on it so that way they can heal from it. Now, you mentioned also that can affect the filters that individuals have, as they get older as an adult. How does that show up in different individuals?
So I'll give you a different example. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Secret, about manifesting.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the book, The Secret, it's about manifesting, and manifesting is about this idea that, you can draw things to you. It's sometimes also called the law of attraction. You can bring what you want into your life by acting like you already have it, like you are already the kind of person that has things like that.
Mhm.
When I first read that book, probably well over a decade ago, I thought it was ridiculous. And
Mhm.
me being the logical person that I am, completely dismissed it and thought to myself, I just wasted 2 or 3 hours of my life reading that book. Uh, One of the realizations that I came to after doing the work that I did was that I had been, for a very long time, one of the best negative manifestors that ever existed. And let me explain that.
Mhm.
Um, when you have these beliefs in the back of your mind, I don't matter, people leave, there's something wrong with me. Um, Everything around you, you perceive it through that filter.
Mhm.
And your brain, this is a neuroscience thing, there's so much sensory input happening around you at any given moment. Your brain cannot process it all in the conscious mind. And so there is a filtering system that
Mhm.
decides what is brought to your conscious attention.
Mhm.
And it factors in every one of your beliefs, even the ones you don't realize. Um, and it will highlight things that agree with the beliefs, and it will downplay or hide the things that don't agree with the beliefs. And so if you have beliefs of, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, and you're trying to manifest things that in your mind, worthy people are the only ones
Mhm.
that can have those things, it's going to fail. Whereas anything that happens around you that confirms that you're not worthy, even if it's the tiniest little indication, like the way somebody looks at you or the tone of somebody's voice, your brain is going to look at that. The filters are going to let that through, but they're going to highlight it as, here's proof that you're not worthy. Here's proof that you're not good enough. And this is happening continually without your awareness.
Mhm.
And that's what was blocking me in terms of manifesting. Well, it was blocking the positive manifesting. It certainly wasn't blocking the negative manifesting.
I read, I forgot the source, but I read that it takes 20 positive thoughts to offset a negative thought. I don't know how much of that is true, but like you mentioned, when you think negatively, you're going to attract negative.
Yeah,
And with individuals that go through dysfunction and trauma, it's almost kind of like the same thing. It makes sense because that's why they keep attracting perhaps the wrong relationships and the wrong jobs
hmm,
because they're
absolutely,
thinking. Now,
absolutely.
the brain, like you mentioned before, the brain is neuroplasticity. So we're able to reprogram the mind to think positive and offset all those negative thoughts and attract the positive things in
Yes,
life. We do that. So it's almost
absolutely,
like it's like a magnetic kind of thing because you start attracting it to your life. I truly believe that. I truly believe that you have to change your mindset, especially individuals that have gone through major traumatic events in their life. And, they need to reprogram their minds to positive thinking. Because, like you mentioned,
absolutely.
many individuals were blaming themselves, for things that happen, unfortunately. And I believe that you answer my third question. If you can describe these belief filters as becoming almost invisible over time, so ingrained that we don't even realize that they're there, what helped you recognize that these filters were operating in your life even without your awareness?
So what made it visible, I guess you could say, for me, was it started with the process of learning how it works. And somebody, a good friend of mine that, ran the program that I went through to do the work, it started out by her explaining all of how this works to me, explaining how the different parts of the brain are parts of these filters and how beliefs that you formed in your childhood uh, end up affecting these filters. Um, and even though, as I started to become aware that, maybe I had beliefs that I thought I'd already dealt with, because I've done a fair amount of work. I've gone to seminars and listened to podcasts and read books and, all kinds of work. And I would love, if we have time, I'll get into why doing all kinds of work like that doesn't help. Because there's a reason why it doesn't work. But to get back to the point, I started to realize, well, wait a minute, maybe I didn't deal with those beliefs, with the previous work that I had done. And I started to notice a pattern. The things that did happen in my childhood, that fed the same beliefs. And then when I took that combined with how these beliefs become filters, I started to connect the dots basically and say, well, wait a minute. Now, how would somebody who has a belief, say, of everybody leaves, how might they perceive things around them? And I'll give an example of that. So somebody who has that belief embedded and is sitting quietly with their partner, and their partner's very quiet. And they might think to themselves, oh my gosh, I must have done something. They're upset. That's why they're not talking. Oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? Whereas in reality, your partner might just be relaxing in the moment, totally neutral. They're not thinking at all about anything you did. In fact, maybe they're as relaxed as they are because they draw comfort from being in your presence. That's almost the opposite of what you're thinking. And so that's how I started to connect those dots. And when I want to say it was almost like a slow cooking process in my brain for it to really sink in over time. And it just started to make more and more sense. And I eventually came to the realization there must be tons and tons of people in the exact same situation that I was in who are wondering why things keep working out the same way, and they don't know why. And because I'll tell you, I was mystified. I didn't understand, with all the work that I'd done, why I was seeing the same patterns. I've been married 3 times. I was seeing my third marriage start to go down the exact same path that my second marriage went down. And I was desperate to do something, but everything I tried wasn't working. And I didn't understand. And that's when I finally reached out to the program that, walked me through all the work.
That makes a lot of sense. So the perception, because of those negative thinking, your perception of, interpreting things and behavior,
Yes.
they were like kind of triggered. And that kind of creates kind of like a anxious attachment. You mentioned the example that you gave, the other individual was calm and was interpreting in a different way because they're secure in their attachment. And because the person was having those conflicts in interpersonal conflicts, they may perceive it differently. They may perceive it as being rejected and, being not listened to and not being communicated to. So you said that discovering in weakening these beliefs changed your life immeasurably. Like when you found out this is what it is, I need to work on this. This is how I'm going to do it. And you mentioned you joined a program. Can you speak a little bit about what kind of tools that program helped you with, or that made you start working and how you say promoted that change in you?
Absolutely. And I can give you a very specific example from my childhood that is going to definitely show how the process works and how you can deal with some of these issues. When I was, I want to say maybe 11 or 12, my parents were driving from Toledo, Ohio to Cleveland, Ohio, and we stopped at a rest stop on the turnpike. I had been asleep in the back seat, and they had already gone inside. I woke up, I look around, I see, oh, we're at a rest stop. I want to be a responsible kid. I should go to the bathroom. And so I went inside to the rest stop, went to the bathroom, came back out, walking up to the car. I'm reaching for the door handle as they drove away because they had no idea that I wasn't still asleep in the back seat. Um, now, even in that moment and over the time that passed before they came back for me, I kept telling myself, oh, they just didn't realize that I wasn't in the car. That's of course that's what happened. But you can probably imagine an 11 or 12-year-old kid back further in the back of their mind, they're thinking they don't care enough about me to make sure that I'm actually in the car before they leave. And that becomes another belief, that turns into a filter. I don't matter. Well, in doing the work around these events and the people, as an adult, remember what I said about how your beliefs are purely emotion based as a child. But as an adult, you've got analytical ability to look at a situation. You can think about it logically. You can also, as an adult, realize that your childhood understanding that all parents know how to parent is severely flawed.
That's so true.
And you're able to see it all from a different perspective. And you can even put yourself in their shoes and think, oh my God, if I was in their shoes, I would have been losing my mind. And it basically, what ends up happening is you form two, well, you already formed the first one as a child, but you form a new understanding of the event based on your adult analytical abilities. And the two understandings don't agree. And when that happens, there's a process that happens in your brain. It's called memory reconsolidation that basically fixes it and helps. It doesn't eliminate the old belief, but it removes its power, because now you understand it from a different perspective. Now you understand parents aren't perfect. Parents make mistakes. That was a mistake. That had nothing to do with you as a person or as a child. It was simply a mistake. And so that's how you start to break down those beliefs. And then also makes you be able to perceive things differently, because that belief is no longer shaping how you perceive things.
So from what you mentioning said, the experiences that the child may have can cause them to have those beliefs. And then when they grow up to be adults, you look at it in a different perspective, and you're able to reframe the whole experience.
Exactly.
And see it as, seeing the child, the adult, and seeing the situation as a whole, and reframing the whole situation that perhaps, they overlooked that you left, and not see the situation as a total negative experience.
Exactly.
And be able to acknowledge, okay, this happened, it wasn't my fault, and, moving forward, how can I change this? So now I have another question. How do your process led you to create Forging Truth? And if you can explain a little bit about what is Forging Truth and what it means, your mission, and speak a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So basically, I'd say I'd probably maybe about a year or so after I'd done most of the work, I started feeling like there's got to be, earlier I said tons and tons, but frankly, if we're going to put numbers on it, it's not thousands, it's not hundreds of thousands, it's more like millions and beyond of people who are in that exact same circumstance. And when I saw how much it changed my life, and I saw how much it changed what I believed was true, what I believed was possible, because that's where this really gets in your way. These beliefs and the filters that come from them end up shaping what you think is possible. If you had asked me 5 years ago, hey, have you ever thought about starting your own business? I would have been like, oh, no, that's not me. I'm not one of those people, because in my mind, that concept existed. There were people who start businesses and there were people who don't. And the people who start businesses, that's a pretty small group. And I'm just not in that group. Now I believe, obviously, completely differently because I'm almost a year into having my own business. And, I started out with a goal of I want to help as many people as I can.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a bigger, high-level goal, but I have to focus initially in order to get myself established and get myself known. And so I focus now on men in midlife who are, almost pretty much the same situation that I was in, and helping them, uncover and break through those negative beliefs, and understanding all of that, and then starting to realize that how it will change what they believe is possible, and that changes what you're passionate about, and that changes what you can believe is your purpose. And that's exactly what happened with me, and why I founded Forging Truth.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you work with middle-aged males, and that I think that's great because there's not too many programs that are offering that assistance or service to middle-aged men, because there is such a thing that men go through middle age
The
where
midlife
they
crisis.
yes, exactly, and they're having a lot of problems with those beliefs, and
Yeah.
things from the past start surfacing. And
Yeah.
many of them, it affects them. It gives them depression and many other things, anxiety and all that. So
Absolutely.
the service is needed. The service is needed. Yes, because they do struggle with, I know of a person that I know that her husband, after middle age, he came out and talked about some things that happened to him when he was a child, but never throughout his marriage or throughout his life he was able to talk about it, acknowledge it, or bring it to the surface. So, it caused him some, feelings. You know how it is when you're in a healing journey, you go through many, shifts. And the person experienced those shifts because of, he was healing. But I'm glad that service is out there. The population that you service is middle-aged men, or do you accept other age brackets? And what is your ideal client?
My ideal client is men in midlife. When I first started, I had a much broader view, and wanted to try to spread the message to a much broader audience. But what eventually I realized was that if you're trying to speak to, everyone, say from ages 30 to 65, men and women, there is no single message that can land with that huge group. So while I am absolutely open to working with just about anyone who I feel is ready to do this sort of work, my focus in terms of how I promote myself right now is focused on men in midlife. But I have no hesitation whatsoever working with anyone who's running into these kinds of things, and everyone runs into these kinds of things. This is not a problem that's unique to men in midlife at all. I mean, generally, you probably need to be a little older, because I think most people in their 20s or even their 30s, are feeling pretty confident about themselves, or feeling like, well, they haven't seen the filter yet. They haven't realized there's a pattern going on yet. It hasn't had enough time to become visible to them. And whereas older people, that's, they start to realize there's something going on here. I don't know what it is, but something has to be going on here. There has to be a reason why the same things keep happening, even though I'm trying so hard to do something about it.
It's almost like they face a reality, like you mentioned, they face that reality. There's a pattern going on. How do I break this pattern, and what can I do? And you mentioned that it takes that, I guess, that level of maturity to realize those filters. You mentioned that perhaps maybe the younger generation, they're not there yet because they haven't reached that maturity, or they haven't made the mistakes that allowed them to see that, be
I
able
don't know
to.
if it's I don't know if it's about maturity as
Mm-hmm.
much as it's about seeing similar things happening,
Mm-hmm.
seeing the pattern starting to form,
Mm-hmm.
so in my case, um, seeing my third marriage start to go down the same path that my first two marriages went down,
Mm-hmm.
um, seeing a recurring theme in my career regarding being kind of passed over for promotions, and someone else getting it who I felt I was better qualified than.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's I don't think it's just a matter of you have to become mature enough.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is a little bit of that in it, in that, the more mature you become, I think maybe you become more able to become introspective and
Mm-hmm.
kind of really look at yourself and be willing to accept
Mm-hmm.
things that, when you were not so mature, you might not have been willing to accept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so through Forging Truth, you now help others walk a similar path of clarity
Mhm.
and healing. What encouragement will you offer our listeners today who feel unworthy, disconnected, or unsure of real change is possible?
Oof, that's not simple. um, well, I want to reiterate what I said before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're not doing something wrong. You're
Mm-hmm.
not at fault. It's just simply that you are not aware of how these belief-based filters are affecting how you perceive the world around you, and how it's a self-reinforcing system. I already said that, if your belief is, people leave, um, and you notice somebody being quiet,
Mm-hmm.
not only do you start to think that, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? That in itself reinforces the belief. And until you can break it, I mean, there's definitely a cycle that continues to reinforce the beliefs. When you think about how the filter is basically comparing everything that's happening around you to your beliefs, and it's really kind of only letting through the things that agree with your beliefs, you can imagine how this reinforces itself.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to touch on something here, though, because it may sound like, why would our brain work against us like that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, as a child, this entire process served a very, very valuable purpose. It helped protect you. It helped
Mm-hmm.
you understand and find a way to, exist in that environment where you didn't feel completely out of control, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And the difference is, as an adult, you don't need that protection anymore. But beliefs are still there. They're still driving how you see the world around you. And, so for the people who are, wondering, gosh, is this possible? I unfortunately, I don't think I can just say some words and give them tremendous faith and belief, other than to, say it works. It worked for me. I know many other people it's worked for. Um, I it's it changes your life. It truly does.
Mm-hmm. That's a great explanation that you gave, and great words of encouragement. Speaking and teaching others how to do the same. Because it might work for, like you mentioned, it might work for a certain number of people. It might not work for others if they're not prepared. And I heard you say also that you, as a child, you tend to develop that safety self-defense mechanism, and you believe,
Yep.
okay, this is true. But as adult, you're again looking at it in a different perspective. As an adult, that I can, acknowledge this happened, and I want to change. I want to change the way I'm thinking. I want to change, those behavior, those triggers. Anything else that you want to share with the listeners? We have a few minutes. Any way that they can contact with you if they're interested in connecting with you?
So obviously my website is the primary method, forgingtruth.com. I'm on all the socials. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. If you search Forging Truth, you'll find me there as well. One thing that I would like to leave your listeners with is the potential impact of all of this. I feel like I became unblocked in my late 50s. I can only imagine what my life might have been like had I been able to become unblocked much earlier. And I envision, what if we could have kids, if we could break down and prevent the formation of those beliefs in children, and then they could be unblocked that much sooner, and how the world would be different.
That's a great message. Thank you for sharing that. That's an amazing message. Thank you. I am honored to have you speak about your business and your experience, and I thank you. I thank you so much. And I'm going to share your information for anyone that is looking for this type of help. And again, I thank you so much for being a guest at Being Encourager podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.